Thank you all for joining us this evening. I appreciate all of you. What we're going to do is hello everyone. Hello. So as everybody will see, there's a chat going. And what I thought we'd do is we'd work through the Zoom webinar chat. And so if you have any questions, you can post them there. Simon and I will be watching the chat along with the panelists. And how we're going to work is I'm going to start the introductions and move it towards I hate to say one of my favorites, but one of my favorites. All these alums are favorites of mine. I've gotten to know them over the years, and I'm privileged to have them here today. I'd like to start with the introduction of Christopher Smith. He's a JD from 2014. He's one of the first people that I met on campus. He is a how do you say it, past president of the SBA. So I'm going to turn it over to Christopher, and what we're going to do is we are going to do introductions and talk a little bit about their careers, and then we'll open it up for questions. All right, so Christopher, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Katie, and welcome to all of those joining from the admitted student community. I think I speak for everybody to say we're excited that you've applied to Vermont Law School and you're considering joining what for many of us has become a very special and important community to us. As Katie mentioned, I'm Christopher Smith. I serve as the current president of the Vermont Law School Alumni Association, which is why you guys are stuck listening to me. I currently work as Associate General Counsel for the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, where I advise the regulatory body on various aspects of law, including administrative law. We are developing cannabis law, and I do a lot of contracts and procurements for the commission. I got to this position. I was previously in private practice as a corporate attorney, and my first job out of law school was with the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation doing securities work. I actually got that job through a semester in practice I did at Vermont Law School that introduced me to that commissioner and the agency that ultimately led to the job that I got there. So that's just a quick overview of my career since Vermont Law School. I can tell you the reason I chose Vermont Law School was the thing that sold me most was Vermont Law School took a very strong stance in the 1990s. When Don't Ask, Don't Tell was law, and Congress passed what was called the Solomon Amendment that said any school that does not allow military recruiters on campus, which Vermont Law School didn't because the military policy violated its non-discrimination policy. The Solomon Amendment said all those schools would lose their federal funding, and Vermont Law School said, all right, well then we will turn down our federal funding because we believe more in non-discrimination than receiving that money. So that piece of information was really what just pushed me over the edge to choose Vermont Law School, and I couldn't be happier that that was the choice I made. So next, I'll kick it over to Dylan King, who's JD of 2017, to introduce himself.
Sure, thank you, Chris. So my name is Dylan King, as Chris said. I work at a large private practice firm called Beveridge and Diamond. We are, I think, the country's still largest pure environmental law firm, which is fantastic. I came to the firm out of law school as a 2L summer. I was a summer associate there. It was a fantastic experience, and I'm there now. My practice is, well, for those of you who are not familiar with what a private practice environmental lawyer might do, a large portion of what I do every day is advising corporations on environmental compliance litigation. So that can be anything from permitting a new, recently I was permitting a waste transfer station, which is not the sexiest thing of all time, but it has to be done. I was also involved in a lot of recent PFAS litigation in Massachusetts, so sometimes I get to be on the forefront of environmental law, which is fantastic. And then other times it's more mundane things like product development. So company will develop a product. Maybe they'll have materials from overseas. Maybe they're using materials that they're not sure about. And they say, you know, how does this product fit into the world of environmental law? Where can I send it? What can I do with it? Can I sell it? And all that good stuff. But right now, all our litigation work is a little bit dried up because of the coronavirus. So it's much more in the regulatory sphere. I'm happy to talk about that to no end with you guys. And my pro bono practice focuses on mostly farms and organic food co-ops in Massachusetts and in New England in general. And that's advising them on corporate issues, corporate development stuff, corporate formalities. As you can imagine, many people who work in farms and stuff just don't have a background in how to do those things. And so it's great to be able to spend my time going out to these farms and hanging out with them and helping them out. And then sometimes I get free bacon, which is fantastic.
That's awesome. Thank you. Next, I will introduce Lori Anthony, JD class of 1997.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Anthony, and I graduated from VLS back in the, I guess, the dark ages compared to my colleagues here. I did not go to law school directly out of college. I had 4 years working experience, and I chose VLS. I didn't know, and frankly, the term wasn't as big, nearly as big then as it is now, but I wanted to do environmental justice, but I didn't know what that was. And that was just based on things that I saw in the community where I lived in Cleveland. Proud Ohioan, let me tell you, proud Clevelander. But I didn't know what it was called. So I went to VLS because of that and because of the strong social justice, policy and awareness. And also because it looked like a place where I would be challenged, frankly, on some of my views, which I think that's how we grow. So I went to VLS and I came back to Ohio. I worked for 4 years at the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati. I exhausted kind of all the areas that I wanted to work there. I knew I wanted to do social justice work. I wanted to be a public servant, basically. I knew that going into law school. And so after working at Legal Aid, a spot opened up at the Ohio Attorney General's office. And I jumped on it because I wanted to do either environmental or civil rights. Again, going back to the environmental justice angle. And so the spot was in workers' comp. Didn't know a thing about workers' comp, but I took it because I wanted to get in the door. And I can speak workers' comp ease now, but I got in the door, a spot opened up in civil rights. I jumped on it. And, long story short, 17, 18, almost 19? Wow. Many years later, I'm the section chief of the civil rights section in the Ohio Attorney General's office. And so what we do is we litigate I have attorneys all over the state that I manage, and we handle all the civil rights litigation that comes from the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. And, you name it, race, disability, religion, service animals, emotional support animals, the whole nine. It is never a dull moment. I attribute that success in large part, very large part, obviously, to VLS and to the community that I had in law school, and the critical thinking and just the support in going into public service.
Excellent, thank you. I will also note that Lori serves with me on the board of directors of the Vermont Law School Alumni Association. Thank you so much, Lori. Next, I will kick it over to Ellen Chakowski, JD of 2015.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ellen Chakowski, class of 2015. I might be having internet issues, so bear with me. I went straight from law school from undergrad, and I have a background in environmental biology. And I originally went for wildlife law, but I started studying and I found that I loved many aspects of the law beyond wildlife law and beyond environmental law generally. I did 4 different internships when I was in law school, because as I continued to study, I just kept finding different avenues that I really enjoyed. And during one of my internships with the Natural Resources Board, which is a state agency in Vermont that handles land use and administers the Act 250 program, which is a Vermont-specific law that handles all land use and development in the state, I went on a field trip to the Vermont State House and I interacted with someone known as a legislative counsel attorney. And I asked my boss, what is their job title? And he said, they write the law that we have to follow. They're the ones who actually type it out for the committees. So 6 years later, I am now a legislative counsel attorney with in the State House in Vermont, and I am the Act 250 attorney. So my title is Natural Resources broadly, but I pretty much spent all my time doing Act 250, which is land use, but I also work on municipal zoning, forestry, forest carbon sequestration was a topic recently. I'm doing a lot of wildlife, so hunting laws, but also Migratory Bird Treaty Act has been a really big topic lately. So I have my environmental roots in wildlife law, but I also have found that legislative work is really, really fun. So I am the person who drafts all of the bills for the legislators. When they have an idea, they put it in, and I am the person who drafts it if it's land use or natural resources related. And then I testify before the House and the Senate on those issues, which normally is really fun because it involves me in person in the State House all day. But lately it's been a little unusual because we have transitioned to Zoom also. So now I'm streamed on YouTube whenever I need to testify on an issue. My path wasn't straight to legislative counsel after graduation. It took me a little while to find a job, but my first job out of law school was as a law clerk for the US Department of Justice in DC. And I worked in the environmental crimes section, and I was a member of the Volkswagen prosecution team for a year. And that was really interesting, fast-paced work that everyone in the country knew about. So that connection came out of me having done an internship with the environmental enforcement section during law school also, and we have a ton of connections. The environmental division in the US DOJ, we have a ton of connections. There's a ton of VLS people working there. So I spent a year there and then came back to Vermont, which I had fallen in love with Vermont during law school, and so I feel very lucky that I have gotten to work here. But VLS has a really great legislative program. They have a legislation class and then a clinic and connections to the State House. So so VLS was really instrumental in forging this path, and I love my job so much, and I'm so grateful for VLS because of that. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And Ellen, I'm correct in citing that you were also an SBA president, is that right?
I was, Christopher, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we're going to go to Ricky Caperton, who was a Master's of Environmental Law and Policy from the class of 2012.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone, and thanks for having me on the panel. So my name is Ricky. I currently work as a land use planner in the city of Clovis, which is in the Central Valley portion of California. For point of reference, it's about an hour and a half from Yosemite National Park. So I've been doing this for about 3 years now in the public sector doing land use planning. My work primarily focuses on working with commercial and residential developers, developing and subdividing land for basically subdivisions or commercial development of varying degrees. Prior to that, and right after graduating from VLS, when I moved back to California, I was working for a private consulting firm doing environmental analysis per the California Environmental Quality Act. So I did that for about 5 years, which I still use a lot of that background and knowledge in my everyday work because if you're familiar with California land use planning, if you have a project, you have to do an environmental analysis on it. So the background and the education and the skill set that I received from Vermont was very invaluable to getting me to where I'm at today. I very much miss my time in Vermont. I unfortunately have not been back yet to visit, but I'm hoping I will do so. But as some of you may know, life gets in the way sometimes, so it's hard to make that time. So other than that, happy to answer any questions. I've been an urban planner in land use realm of things since I've been out. So it's been a great career for me. I'm very glad that I chose it. So happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Excellent, thank you. You've got 2 years till your 10-year reunion, so hopefully we'll see you out in Vermont then.
I will be out there. And then also I'll add too that I was on the, I spent 2 years as a board of director for the California Association of Environmental Professionals. So it's a professional organization out here in California comprised of attorneys, city planners, consultants. So, that's
really cool. Thank you. Next, we will go to Kristen Campbell, JD 2015. Take it away, Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'll throw out there too, I'm a JD Melp, and I realize I can change my, it's okay, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's great. So I didn't go to BLS straight out of undergrad. I started work on a master's program. I completed a master's program at Columbia and debated doing the science route or the law school route. I have a background in atmospheric science. And so the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to do climate change law. And so I was that person who showed up at BLS saying, hello, it's day one, career services. I want to work in climate change law and policy. That's what I want to do. And they were like, oh, okay. But then I structured a lot of my BLS classes around it and found that there was a lot that was really interesting, but was still super determined. And now I have been with the same organization since I graduated. It's been about 5 years, which is insane that it has been 5 years. I work for a small nonprofit that's based in DC, but I live in Vermont and work remotely and have for about the past 2.5 years doing climate change law and policy. So it's kind of all worked out. I got the job because I interned for them the summer after my second year in law school. And I got the internship because the organization seemed interesting, and I sent them an email and asked if they were taking interns for the summer, and they said, yes, we're happy to have you. So then I sent them a resume. So it just all kind of worked out of me wanting this and putting in the effort and kind of structuring my classes and my coursework around how can I do international environmental law and make that a thing. And luckily VLS had a lot of avenues and also a lot of people that were very, very supportive in making that happen and just pulling it all together and helping me pick classes, whether they were specific to climate change or if they would just inform more or less the sort of work that I do. So my work is very much research-based. I spend most days just reading about science and learning what's happening in the climate change world, which is ever evolving and ever exciting. And then I translate it all and write about it for policymakers. Right when I got hired, I worked on the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer and helped my team, who we worked with the EPA, the State Department, and heads of state and ministers of the environment all around the world to pass the Kigali Amendment. And then I have since shifted to focus a lot of my work on the Arctic and policies that we can implement to protect the Arctic. So that's like pretty much all my work. It's always different. It's always exciting. And there's always so much to do. Yeah, that's me.
That's exciting, thank you. And last but certainly not least, especially in my heart, is Hermes Pierre, JD of 2015.
Hi, everyone, and congratulations on being admitted to Vermont Law School. I was a former ambassador, so I'm always excited to be able to welcome new students. So currently I'm the founding and managing partner of the Pierre Law Firm, where we help women-led households navigate family and juvenile courts. So what that looks like is pretty much I assist families with their divorce, child custody, and things that are related to domestic relations, as well as represent parents in dependency proceedings. And just a little bit of background as to what dependency proceedings is when the Department of Family and Children Services files a petition with the court alleging that there's been abuse, neglect, or abandonment of a child, and the court contacts our firm and appoints me to represent the parents. Because regardless, we are constitutional fighters, and we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that their legal rights are preserved and protected. Similar to Lori and Kristen, I was a non-traditional student. I worked in human services before going to law school. So there was a time where Dean Jefferson, someone you will all get a chance to meet and who you will all love, I guarantee you, as well as Katie, at a LSAC forum, she told me all about Vermont Law School and encouraged me to come up to Vermont and visit. So I applied, went to Vermont Law School, visit the school. One thing that I loved about the school was the fact that we have small classrooms where we will be able to get one-on-one attention from our professors. When you want to meet with your professor away from the classroom, you don't have to sign a sign-up sheet. You can make an appointment and it pretty much immediately be able to speak with your professor. And that's something that you rarely will get at larger law schools. And not only that, the camaraderie that we have with the students and being able to get to know all of your classmates, the ones before you and the ones that will come after you on a first name basis, as well as the faculty and staff. So that's one of the beautiful things about being admitted to Vermont Law School and actually being a student at Vermont Law School. So just a little bit more background. Prior to starting my own firm, I was in private practice. I worked for 2 law firms where we represented municipalities, government agencies, corporations, in litigation regarding what slip and falls and premises liability, automobile accidents, things of that nature. And I'm also available if you guys have any questions. I started my practice about a year, so I am a year in and I have a lot of insight as to what classes you should take. And if you're interested in becoming a solo practitioner or starting your own practice, one of the programs that I highly recommend, which I was a part of, is the general practice program. I have a certificate in general practice program, and that was very instrumental in me being able to start my own practice. So I'm also available if you have any questions. And if you may think of a question after the our Zoom conferences has ended, you are more than welcome to get in contact with me afterwards, and I'll be more than willing to talk with you over the phone. We can set up our own Zoom conferences where I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have about having your own practice and running your own practice and while practicing law.
Thank you. And I had noted when you mentioned the general practice program, how many people on the video were nodding. So I think we have a few members here that that also did that program and probably would attest to its qualities. So I believe that that's all of our panelists at this point, and I think we want to open it up to questions from the admitted students. Is that right, Katie?
Yes. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to put your questions in the chat, I'm also looking at the question and answer, but all panelists can see it. Do we have any questions out there? I kind of have one while you guys are thinking about questions. And Dylan, this is directed to you. We had a meeting or a lecture from Pat on Tuesday, from Pat Parento, regarding the Trump and the EPA. And is your firm working on those cases? Are you guys cleared up?
Yeah, are you talking about the sort of coronavirus discretion guidance?
Yes.
Yeah, not personally, but it has certainly caused an uproar for our clients. And we've invested considerable time and effort to really understand what that means for our clients. And so I can, for someone who wants to go into corporate environmental law or work at a private firm, this is the kind of situation where I get the midnight phone call and the client says, hey, I have this A, B, and C going on at my facility. We basically turned the facility off because of the coronavirus. Here's some EPA guidance, translate it for me and tell me tomorrow morning over breakfast what this means. It's one of the few times where my job gets sort of a work all night, everybody's freaking out sort of scenario, which is fun, every once in a while. So yeah, it's had a large impact. And I think that in the coming weeks, all sorts of attorneys from agencies and law firms and in-house counsel as well will all be struggling to decide what exactly that means for everyone.
All right. Okay. Lori, I'm interested in your work in civil rights, and are you seeing a growth in civil rights and environmental justice as everything's changing? Because a lot of in relation to COVID, it's affecting disadvantaged communities. What are you kind of seeing in your firm as it relates to civil rights?
Right now we just have kind of, I'll just say like anecdotal information. We're not getting those types of complaints, I'm going to say yet, because frankly, I think that people are, I don't want to say distracted, but yeah, kind of distracted with they lost their jobs, they're trying to file for unemployment, and really just trying to stay safe. Ohio reacted, fortunately, very early and like swiftly to the coronavirus. I mean, we went on lockdown gradually, but it was a little ahead of some other states, and so I think that people not only had some time to adjust and plan, but I think right now we're seeing the numbers come out with a disproportionate effect on communities of color, and in everything, in the healthcare, in the housing. I was on a call earlier regarding individuals with disabilities, and you add the extra layer of not being able to get out. Some of these individuals have healthcare workers that come to their home to assist them, and some of those healthcare workers are either choosing not to come or saying they don't want to come, or everything is kind of like all over the board right now. So I don't know that we won't ever get those complaints. I think right now people are just kind of just trying to get through, if that makes sense, before complaints like that actually start coming in. But we are seeing those numbers, and we are definitely watching them. We have some limited authority to act independently of someone making a complaint, but and that could be an option. But right now we're just trying to watch the numbers and see what's going on.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. I know that was one of my big questions.
Yeah.
I actually have some questions here. Let's see. All right, this is from Matthew. Hello, Matthew. When doing summer internships, externships, where are those typically located? I know you all are from across the country. And what was your experience and ease with finding them?
Hey, Katie, can I start? Because I'm going to knock out that question and also Thomas's question, which is below.
Okay,
So I'll tell you, I can give you Matt's answer as far as it applies to private law firms, and then I'll also answer Thomas's question. And Thomas is right, a lot of firms, they hire summer associates, which is like a summer internship type program for 2Ls. They hire those during your 1L year. So Matt, you asked where do you sort of, where those might be located, and that's wherever the firm is. If it's a firm with multiple offices, they might bring all their interns or summer associates or externs or whatever to their mothership, wherever the biggest office is, or they might have them in regional offices. It's a little bit depending on what firm or what agency or what group you're looking at. And Thomas, finding those roles VLS makes it quite easy. VLS has great resources through the Career Services Office that will help you find those. They also send around emails, and then there's, as you noted, on-campus interviews, which is OCI for anybody who's reading his note down there. And Matt, Matthew, to go to your housing question, that one's tough. And I'm sure some other people can speak up about their own internship and externship experiences, but it is tough to look for example, a 10-week, apartment in DC for, that's affordable for a law school student. That is a real fear. Luckily, a lot of cities have, particularly ones with big universities, have sort of like housing swap services and things. So when I went to DC for a summer, I called up Georgetown University and they connected me to a bunch of students that they knew were leaving for the summer. And one of them rented me their apartment and it was sweet. It worked out really well. And that was something that, again, Abby Armstrong, who you'll know over Career Services, told me about. So there's lots of resources for you to lean on, and no one's getting left out in the cold, and you'll not be confused about where you're going to live. That will be taken care of. And then Thomas, just to finish your question, you had one other question. Oh yeah, the process for on-campus interviews is you start applying usually in the spring before you'll go. So that would be, basically during your spring of your, oh no, I think it was actually during spring of your 2L year. Katie, you can correct me on this, it's been a while. But anyways, you apply, you get accepted, you might apply to a bunch of firms, a bunch of firms will come to campus and do on-campus interviews, others will be interviewing you from California over the video conference. Some of them will just want to talk to you on the phone. There'll be a couple of stages of interviews, and then you'll land somewhere great, and you'll go there for 8 to 10 weeks over the summer. Often you'll get paid, which is great. And then a lot of law firms hire out of those summer programs. So what's fantastic is that if you have a great summer and you love it there, and everybody gets along or whatever, and they'll extend you a job offer, and you'll know where you're going to go after graduation before your 3L year even starts. So if you're interested in going private practice, it is a nice bonus to doing that because you have a lot less stress for your 3rd year than you might otherwise. Just a little add-on bonus. But then you graduate, take the bar, and then you start at that firm the fall after you graduate.
I think Hermes had something to add on that question as well.
Yes, definitely. My first 1L year at VLS, I knew what area that I wanted to practice, which was child advocacy. So what I did was met with Beth Locker, and another goal that I had in my mind was that I want to get paid. And I know there's a thing with public interest that you're not going to get paid, which is absolutely true. But with me, I was like, I need to get paid. I need money. So what I did was I worked with Beth Locker, and all of my summer internships were paid. And I found some of the best internships. So the best advice that I would give you is 1, identify what area of practice you really want to do, and 2, start going to career services before they even reach out to you. I know there's a time period where they can't speak with you, but once the first day where you are able to meet with the career services counselor, go meet with them and build and maintain a relationship with your career services counselor, because they have a lot of resources. They can reach out to a lot of alumni from VLS. They can really help you find the internship that you want in your goal. I knew that I wanted to return back to Atlanta. So my summer and semester practice program was in Atlanta at a court in Fulton County, which we never had a relationship with anyone at the court, but through, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, perhaps Jeff White, Katie, is that? Okay, we built a relationship with Fulton County Juvenile Court, and because of the relationship that we built, other students from VLS was able to come in and to extern with the court. So as I mentioned, what is your goals? What area of practice do you want? And start looking for internships before other people. And it is possible that you can get paid doing public interest work.
I did note there was a question in here about not necessarily being from Vermont and what to expect in that environment. Hermes, I'll start with you, knowing that you came from Atlanta, and Ricky, I think you came out from California, so I think you could probably provide some good insight into that, not being from the general Northwest or Midwest where there might be snow experience already?
Okay, so for me, I was lucky enough to come visit Vermont before moving out here. I'm moving out there to South Royalton. But what you can expect is, one, be open-minded, because there's going to be cultural differences. There's going to be, I'm from Atlanta, so I didn't have the expectation of going to South Royalton expecting the conveniences of living in a big city. Just remember, what is your goal? You're going to law school to become this great attorney. And South Royalton is the best place because there's no distractions. So more so what to expect is that you will have a family in South Royalton and manage your expectations, manage your personal expectations. The beauty of being in South Royalton is New Hampshire is right across the border and it's tax-free. So you do all your shopping there. And there's so many fun things to do. While I was at Vermont, I learned how to ski, and fell in love with the sport. Who would have thought that I would have loved to, ski? So just be open-minded to new experiences, not just with school, but also with other things, other extracurricular activities.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, I was kind of similar where I came from a very urbanized area in the Bay Area in California, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, luckily enough for me back then, I was able to actually move out there about a month before classes started for me. So I was really able to kind of get my bearings, kind of get the lay of the land, really explore the area. And I think for me, that really helped me feel comfortable kind of going into a whole new situation, completely different living environment. And I really appreciated that, and I took advantage of the area as well. Much like Hermes, I learned how to ski out there, and I still ski to this day because of what I learned out there. So if you're able to go out there ahead of school at least a couple of weeks early just to kind of get settled in, I think it makes the transition a lot easier. So
one question I see here, and Kristen, I'll direct this to you. What is it like to work in an environmental advocacy role in the current administration / climate? And how has that, how has that affected, your dream of advocacy in that field?
Yeah, so this is a question I get a lot in the past few years or so. So at my job specifically, when we had the Obama administration, we worked directly with the White House from time to time. We worked with the State House the State Department a bunch, as well as the EPA, because they were working on a lot of environmental things. We've seen a lot less of that now. And actually, when we first transitioned into the Trump administration, we attempted to work with the White House, and were quickly kind of not thrown out, but pushed aside. But the thing with working in climate change is my organization has worked with people all over the world. So we kind of drummed up our international efforts and built up a better relationship with France. And so we've done a lot more work with them. Part of my team works directly with the African Union. And so we worked more closely with them. And even our China program is more receptive, and so we've been working with them. But in terms of the United States, while we might not have federal action on our side right now, it led us to being really helpful and instrumental on the state level. And so we've shifted a lot of our domestic advocacy to working with the US Climate Alliance and the states that they work with, and focusing our efforts kind of regionally, and just kind of maintaining a lot of our advocacy points in general. And just we have to shift with the times. So that's part of what happens with advocacy, is you have to be really, really flexible. And even with my organization, we've been working on these massive projects, and we get something an administration that isn't flexible and doesn't really want to work with us, or even now we're dealing with a pandemic. And so we have to reframe a lot of what we do in the context of the world that we're living in. And so just in the past few weeks, we've had to completely shift everything, as well as anticipating what the election might bring in November, and how is that going to change things, modify it. So the advocacy work is still there. And sometimes it's even more dedicated, but it just shifts who your partners are and who you're talking to and who you're working with. And so while we might not have as much of a direct connection with US climate policy, I mean, we still can work with legislators, and we can work with individual states as well. So it's still going. It's just not necessarily in the executive branch of the federal government, just elsewhere.
Fair enough. Alan, I'm going to kick this question to you. Would you suggest any sort of reading to prepare for your first semester? Any pro tips for academic success at VLS?
I was thinking about that. I distinctly remember reading Should You Really Be a Lawyer? Which was an interesting book because it does have a section dedicated to what the first year classes entail. I don't know if I want to, I almost want to recommend reading some really fun fiction before you start law school, because you're going to read every single day, all day long. Maybe scoping out some case law before you get to the first day might be a good idea. But for general academic success at VLS, I mean, VLS has a wonderful, the staff at VLS is wonderful. One of the really fun parts about Hermes alerted to the fact that we are isolated a bit at VLS. It is a beautiful campus in a valley along a river, and there isn't a lot around, but it really is a family. It's a town of 600 people, and the staff and the faculty are there with you a lot, and they are the people that you spend a lot of your time with and getting to know very well. So you can approach professors very easily. The Academic Success Center, Joe Brennan does an amazing job working with students who need additional help or who want to focus their skill set. But professor office hours are really accessible. Everybody is just in one single square block. And so everyone is right there for you to connect with, as well as like in the cafe or at the Worthy Burger or sitting out on the back lawn when we finally have some sun. I mean, it's so easy to interact with the professors, which has a comfort level, which makes asking them academic questions really easy when if you're having a difficulty with the class, because it's like, oh, that's also the person I like see getting coffee every morning. It's really easy to talk to them. I can go ask them this question right now. So getting to know the professors, but also knowing that they are available and right there with you is probably going to be one of the best bets, and probably one of the best things about VLS. It's such an easy, open community. Especially in addition, we have a lot of fun extracurricular activities and a lot of like fun events and shows that we put on that the professors, the faculty are really involved with. So the fact that we know all these people outside of the academic setting makes it really easy to get help from them in the academic setting.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to kick this next question to Lori. Veronica was saying she has, work experience prior to going to school and has set her up perfectly for her degree. But what tips do you have for carving out a path to finding your direction?
Here's what I tell law students when I do on-campus interviews for the Attorney General's office. And one of the things I tell just about everybody I interview is you got to do a gut check, right? You got to be true to yourself. What do you want? Forget about the norm. Forget about the movies. Forget about how it's supposed to work out. Forget that. Be you, do you, right? What do you want? And so as far as a path, the path that works for you is going to be the path that works for you. I did not have a direct path. I got a master's degree in sports medicine, and then I went to law school. When you figure that out, please let me know. Okay? So you got to figure out what works for you. And the reason I say that first, and I'll get closer to your question in a second, but the reason I say that first is because you've got to embrace whatever that is, because that is going or should influence every, decision you make down the road, definitely with your career. If you're doing what you should do because of whatever somebody says, that may not be right for you, and that you're not going to be happy. You may not know that you're not going to be happy, but you're not going to be happy. And so, do the gut check. My gut check was, I knew I wanted to do public interest. I mean, total respect to my colleagues, but I knew what Lori Anthony wanted to do. And so from that, it's like, okay, that's my direction. And the next part, to get to the essence, to the heart of your question, and what I tell people is keep your eyes open, keep your mind open. Because, I mean, my path was not direct. It was not direct. I told you a little snippet of it, but there's more to that story. It was not direct. So you got to look for the opportunities. You can learn something from every opportunity. I learned to speak workers' comp. And, if I need to go back into that workers' comp vortex, which, okay, again, respect to my colleagues, but I don't want to go back there. It's just something I picked up, but that led me to another door, which led me to where I am today. And so, do the gut check, think about what you want. If you're not sure what you want, that's okay too. Explore, ask questions, talk to alums, and then look for those paths, look for those stones to cross the river. They will be there. And, don't worry about what's the direct route or how, somebody else did it, or, how it looks on TV or whatever. You got to do what's right for you. Keep your eyes and your ears open. Network. I got the job. I didn't tell you this part, but I got the job at the Attorney General's office because somebody that I usually, one of my regular opposing counsels in court went to work at the Attorney General's office. And when he left, he called me. That's how I found out about the opening. So there is, there's no right way to go about it. There's the way that you need to go about it, and embrace that. Don't be shy about it. Embrace what you want to do. And if you change your mind, that's fine too. That's fine too. And everybody at VLS will help you with that. It's a very supportive environment.
Awesome, thank you. There was a question directed to me, and I'm going to use it slightly to piggyback on what Lori was just saying. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, be open to the paths that sort of present themselves to you. The question that was directed to me was, did I have any concentrations or certificates or specific clerkships or internships during my time at VLS that helped guide me to my position now? I had a very circuitous path to where I am today, both as a lawyer and in my position at the commission. I worked for 6 years before I even started college, and then worked full-time while going to college before I went to Vermont Law School. I went to Vermont Law School expecting to do family law. I wanted to be a guardian ad litem. That didn't happen. My first summer, I got an internship with Prudential Financial in their securities division through the National LGBT Bar Association, which I took because it was a job that, sort of presented itself. I felt I was qualified for, so I applied for it, even though it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And that actually resulted in me loving securities law. And so that's what led me to my clerkship with the Department of Financial Regulation in Vermont, which led to a semester in practice, which led to a job as director of capital markets. I went from there to corporate private practice. And I will say that's because I thought that's what I should do. I thought that was the next logical step for me. I did it for 2 years. I definitely learned a lot, but one of the things I learned was that private corporate practice was not my chosen path. And, you know, but it was that sort of circuitous resume and path that ultimately made my resume uniquely right to be the Associate General Counsel for a new regulatory agency in Massachusetts, doing law that nobody has done in Massachusetts before, and only a handful of states have done in the country. So I just kind of want to say that those internships were key, and being open was key. With respect to, I did get a business law certificate from Vermont Law School. I actually believe I was the first person to do that because it didn't exist for very long. And even though, and part of the question was, even though Vermont has a strong environmental program, how do the other programs stack up? You can't have a premier environmental law program without the foundation of an incredible legal education. So if you're going to take business courses, you're going to take national security, you know, human rights, whatever you're going to take, you're going to get a good legal education doing it. I will recommend, for those of you who are looking to do whatever area of law you're looking to do, take the courses in other areas of law, because right after I went into private corporate practice, one of the first things I had to do was deal with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And fortunately, I took an environmental law course at Vermont Law School, because you should while you're there. So I'll just put that in there. I did also get the general practice program certificate as well. One question, I'm going to kick this question. I'm actually going to open this up to alumni and see who jumps in on it. I think it's a little bit of a follow-up to some of what we talked about with respect to getting internships, but how easy was it to move around for your externships? Were your experiences remote, or did you move out of South Royalton temporarily? And did you have a car while you were in Vermont to travel around Vermont? So I did have a car, but not everybody does. I will say that. There are people who come to Vermont Law School, and it is possible to do it. But I'll open it up to the rest of the panelists to talk about moving around for their internships and moving around Vermont.
I can answer the car portion at least. I actually had my car shipped out from California, which I personally like, because part of what I wanted to do when I was on the East Coast was travel around a bit. So it would just, for what I wanted to do, it made sense. I was able to go into New Hampshire a lot, or did a lot of weekend trips to Boston. You know, I was able to visit Cape Cod, you know, go skiing. So as far as the vehicle question, I did have my car out there, and I'm glad I did. So.
Did anyone on the panel not have a car in SoRo? Kristen Campbell.
I didn't have a car the first year, and then I got my car while I was in law school. And it was something I had debated. So I moved to South Royalton from New York City. So I was like, I'll see how I can do without a car. And definitely, like, it worked for the first year, and I had like we always referred to each other as our monogamous grocery buddies. We would schedule our grocery trips together. It was Libby Bowker, for those of you who know her. But yeah, like every Saturday or whatever, we'd like jump in her car and drive to West Leb, and it gave us an excuse to like hang out with a friend and get our groceries together. And sometimes we'd like go get dinner. Like we'd make a whole day of it, sort of a thing. But then I just really wanted like my own freedom and independence to kind of explore Vermont, to do day trips to Boston. I had a bunch of friends that lived there. So it's definitely possible to do it, I think, without it, because you immediately get to know people and make friends. And I happened to meet my neighbor / car buddy, literally the first person I met at law school, because I sat down at a table at breakfast the first day of orientation, and she sat down next to me because is this seat open? So it all worked out. I was able to get groceries very easily because of that. And I know people that went through the whole thing without it. So I did shift to having my own car. But it's difficult. You have to plan things, but it'll be okay.
Certainly takes planning. Any other thoughts about automotive transport in Vermont, or how you major externships or internships mobile outside of Vermont. I will note that just as a little factoid, I think it's roughly 75% of Vermont law school students end up going outside 50 miles of Vermont Law School upon graduation. And in doing so, end up doing a lot of their externships and internships outside of Vermont as well. We are definitely a national law school, and the Career Services Office and semester in practice or externship office are well equipped to help facilitate that. But I'll open that up to the other panelists to comment.
Sure, I'll comment. My first semester, it's not semester, excuse me, first internship was in Atlanta. I returned back to Atlanta. I didn't have a car my first year. It's similar to Kristen. I had a grocery buddy, my roommate Carmine Sandoval and I. We were able to make it happen. We really didn't go anywhere. We loved being on campus. And if we weren't on campus, we were either at the Worthy Burger, which you will all love if it's still there. Hopefully it's still there. So we rarely left the South area and campus. But for my internship, I went back home. Then the second 2L summer, I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan. During my second year, I brought my car up from Atlanta. And I was personal. The reason why I didn't have my car my first year, I will be honest, I didn't think that I could drive in the snow. I was scared. I was petrified. And I said, I'm not going to take any chances. But I eventually—
You had that fancy sports car.
Yes. Yeah, so I decided I was going to leave it at home. I didn't have any plans on traveling back to Atlanta while I was in school. So the second year, I did bring my car up, and from South Royalton, I drove to Ann Arbor, Michigan by myself. So that was a fun excursion. I really appreciated having a vehicle in Ann Arbor, because when you travel to different places where I didn't know what the culture would be like in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. So I felt that it was important for me to have my car. But if you're asking whether you should have a car at Vermont Law School, you will honestly be able to manage without it. I was a former ambassador. In my first year, the ambassadors were able to take me to the grocery store, pick me up from the Greyhound station. There was another bus service that I was able to get transportation from the ambassador. I can't remember the name. Dartmouth Coach. Is that okay? Yep. So the ambassadors are great. They help out wherever you need them to. My second year, 2L year, 3L year, I was an ambassador. So I paid it forward, and I made sure that my fellow classmates were able to get to places, to the grocery store, wherever they needed to go, as well as if there was a party, I was the designated driver. I was part of VLS. I am blanking on the programs, but there are so many great programs at VLS that I was a part of. But I also was the designated driver if there was a party that a school function or where there was alcohol being served. We made sure that all the students were able to get back home safely. So definitely, you don't necessarily need a car in South Royalton, in my opinion.
Chris, if I can jump in for a hot second too. I was just reading the rest of that question too. Just in case, from my perspective, this may be a question that's raised for many people from sort of a budget standpoint, not just the car, but the leaving the state and going to other cities for internships and things like that. Because for me, certainly choosing my internships and where they were, I had my budget in mind. But for incoming students who may be concerned about that, what you don't see yet, but you will, is sort of a whole universe of programs and micro grants and things like that will help you find housing and be safe and sound for your internship, wherever it might be. There's also, what you don't see yet, is this universe of law school students who live with each other and you stay at your friends' houses, or it works out. But it's definitely something that I was concerned about before I went to law school, is how was I going to live for free while I was doing free internships over the next 3 years and paying for school. And that's a real fear. And so just in case that those questions are raised from that standpoint, it works out. There are solutions, and the school is very helpful. There are resources to make that happen.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh,
Oh,
I'll jump in unless you want to change focus.
no, do it, do it.
So I did one internship in DC, and as I mentioned, VLS has a lot of connections with the Department of Justice, and so I interviewed with them. I did an on-campus interview, and so we have a ton of connections in DC. Our DC alumni group is huge. We definitely are a national law school, and so we have people that go all over the country for internships and after graduation. But my three other internships were in Montpelier, which is the state capital, which is a 42-minute drive straight up the highway. And I live here now, and most of the city is VLS grads. All day long, this morning on my run, I ran into opposing counsel who is VLS grad. All day long in committee, VLS attorneys and graduates who aren't attorneys are in the State House. And so we have, during the summer, the group of, the amount of VLS interns in the city of Montpelier is huge. And so if budget is a problem and you're concerned about not going away, driving to Montpelier for an internship during the day is so easy because there's an entire government here. And that entails not just the legislature, but all of the state agencies, the court, the Supreme Court, the federal court are all within driving distance of VLS. And so we have a huge network in Montpelier alone, but also Burlington and Rutland too. So because we're the only law school in the state, everybody knows the VLS students are looking for internships, and there are so many alumni here who are keeping an eye out for that too.
And if I could just piggyback off that, my 2L summer, I worked in Montpelier for an internship, and we had a great network of alumni, not alumni, sorry, students at the time, who all worked together to set up carpools so that, you know, there was never, folks who didn't have cars were able to get to their internships in Montpelier relatively easily. And so that's one of the great things about having the close, tight-knit community that Vermont Law School has. I'm going to actually combine two questions. And you can probably hear my dog rubbing her face on the floor in the background. Apologies for that. And so there she goes. One is, now that everyone is working, do you think it's necessary to get a specialized master's degree along with your JD? And in particular, do you recommend getting an MBA if you want to start your own practice? So I will combine that with, you know, did anybody, you know, do study abroad or joint degree programs? And if so, did you like it? And did you feel like it was, you know, a lot of extra work to graduate? So I'll kind of open that up to the panel. I will just say that in my experience in private practice, I wished that folks had gotten their MBA.
I can do because I did the dual degree. So I did do the 2 degrees in the 3 years thing. And I went to VLS not intending to do the master's. I was like, I'm going to do just the JD. That's it, and focus on law school. But honestly, what sold me on doing the MELP as well was the classes that it offered. And so there are definitely a lot of people that weigh the pros and cons of like losing a summer of experience and having another internship and whatnot, and just taking more classes. And I think it's a personal choice for everybody, but for me, and looking at like what I wanted to do, but also the diversity of classes that were offered in the summer, I really, really wanted to just be a nerd and study all summer. And it was great. And I took some of my absolute favorite classes that I took at VLS during the summer semesters. I got to talk, and there's like outside professors that come in that aren't normally there, so you just get to meet more people. And like one of my professors is who I did an independent research project with, and I did my main writing paper with. I made connections with a different professor and ended up learning a lot about Chinese law and comparative law and how that works. And then I ended up doing the joint research fellowship, and I got to go to China through VLS and work on a research project with students in China, all as part of it. And so I kind of like built onto that. In terms of extra work, it folds in really, really nicely into the curriculum, and anybody who does like the 2 degrees at once, their like BLS works with you to what your goals are, what your scheduling is, what your personal situation is, so that you can actually make that happen and make it advantageous to you and your career goals and what you want out of it. So it really wasn't much, especially with the dual degrees, because there's a lot of overlap with classes and you can kind of double count things. And in terms of like losing the experience time, you know, for me, it really worked out in that I did an internship and got a job out of it. But you can still, depending on how you schedule things, and you can always work with your advisors, and career services will also play a part in it. You can still work in a semester in practice. You can still I did the clinic on campus, and I worked for the ENRLC, the Environmental Natural Resources Law Clinic, which I'm pretty sure is called something else now, and I don't know what it is. It's like a similar but slightly different name, but that might be wrong too.
Yeah, Environmental Advocacy Clinic, EAC.
Yeah, so that, but you can still work in things like that. You can work in a semester in practice. You can work in part-time internships. So you can still get a lot of hands-on experience while getting a lot of the academic stuff. So for me personally, the extra courses gave me a lot more background knowledge for my internship that became my job, that were very, very specific to the field. But it's one of those, it's a personal choice sort of thing. It doesn't necessarily add a significant amount of work. And it's also one of those things, if you're really into it and really passionate about it, it's easier to kind of squeeze it in and like fit it into your life.
Other thoughts on getting a dual degree or an additional specialized degree in addition to your JD?
Having my own practice, I'm considering, although I don't want to go back to school, perhaps a MBA, because it's really, you're in 2 different roles. You have to have a business mindset, but at the same time too, you still have to have the legal mindset, because you're an attorney at the end of the day. But running a business comes with other challenges. So if I can find a free scholarship to attend a graduate school for an MBA, I would definitely do it.
Great. I'm going to do one. I think this might be the one question we really haven't answered. So I'll maybe actually kind of have this, maybe Katie, do you think be our final question?
Yeah, I think it's a good ending question too.
Okay, good. And I'll ask actually each panelist to give us, do you have any study tips that helped you become successful today? So I'll ask each panelist to give us one study tip that you started with, and I'm going to put Hermes on the spot and start with you.
Okay, a study tip. It's been a while, guys, so.
I can start if I have one ready if you want a minute.
Well, I have one,
Okay.
study groups. What helped me was to form a study group, and the moment that you go to class, that would be the time. Well, not actually, you don't have to wait. Well, let me just say it like this. The sooner you can find a study group, the better. And what I did was, we had a study group and we met at least once a day, or perhaps 3 times a week, but we met often. And in my study group, it was everyone that was in my study group were people that were in my section. So we studied together. If there were any questions that we had, we would ask each other, we would quiz each other. So that would be my tip. Create a study group.
That's a great one. I can vouch for that. Kristen, I'll have you go next.
Good, I can get it in before anybody else does. My study advice that I give to every single person that goes to law school, Ellen, you're already laughing because you know what it's going to be, is take 1 day off a week. Like, set aside 1 day to be a human, to be yourself, to remember all of the reasons you went to law school, to do your laundry, to go grocery shopping, to cook an epic meal, to sit around and watch garbage television with your friends. Like, you need to take some time to just rest, relax, recharge. There's always going to be more work to do. There's always going to be something you could be working on. But if you take that day off, like my day throughout all of law school was Saturdays, like starting at like 5 o'clock on Friday until like 9 a.m. Sunday, there was no work getting done. I was just free to have fun, live a little, get to know all of my classmates and my peers and my friends. And I will tell you that every Sunday morning when it came time to have to like sit down and like get prepped for the week, it was so much easier to get back at it because I had a whole day where it was just like me relaxing. So I tell everybody to do that because I think it's important. And I try to tell myself that now with my own work and my own day-to-day life, but it was so beneficial in law school, like figuring that out. And somebody told me that before law school, and I honestly don't remember who told me.
Yeah, that's a key one. Lori, I'm going to go to you next.
I would say, I can't really take credit for this as something I purposely did. I think it kind of just like happened to me. But I would suggest making sure that you are, if in your study group or in your conversations outside of class, when you're going over the material, that you incorporate people who don't think like you, who have a different perspective on that case, who absolutely disagree with whatever your slant is. Make them tell you why. And if you cannot articulate your position clearly and succinctly in, a few minutes, then I kind of submit that you don't really know what your position is. And that's something that I actually use in, day to day. I want people to push back on me. I go to people who don't think like me on a particular topic, and we deal with some hot button topics. I want to understand that. I want to be able to have that conversation because, like I said before, it helps us all grow. But, that's now in law school. It helps you, I think, helped me understand the material better because I'm, like looking at this from a whole different perspective. And, as a lawyer, you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to see things from different points of view. You got to be able to anticipate what the arguments are going to be on the other side. What's the best way to help your client? What's the best way to proceed? And I think that starts with, I would make a deliberate act of discussing the materials with people who do not think like you.
That's a great point. Ellen, I'm coming to you next.
All right. The only person you should be competing against in law school is yourself. And I think that VLS is one of the reasons I chose VLS is because I heard horror stories at other law schools about, sabotage and people, stealing books from the library and like messing with people's study materials. VLS is not a hyper competitive place. It really felt like we were all in it together. And in the real world, it's like that too. You're not competing against people. You're working on a team normally with a group of people trying to help everyone succeed on whatever the task is. So in law school, being hyper competitive is really not going to get you that far because you need to work with people. Law is generally a very social experience. So participating socially, but also competing against yourself as opposed to competing with other people will definitely help you.
That's definitely a great point of view. Thank you. Ricky, coming at you.
All right. I was hoping I'd go first, but so I'll kind of echo a little bit what everyone else said, but I think you really just have to be open to kind of, finding what works best for you. The study groups definitely is key. Going into VLS, I was never a study group person. I was the one that would, lock myself in the room, do my own homework, and that was perfectly fine. And then I started kind of opening myself up to study groups, and it really does kind of challenge your viewpoints and see things from a different angle that you may not otherwise have. And that's an important skill to bring in any job you get anywhere, really. So I think having that collaboration helps. And very much like Kristen said, I think it's very important to take a day off where you just kind of decompress and figure out which day works best for you, find activities around the area that you like. And I think that's really crucial to just really unwind. For me, it was Sundays because I didn't want to pack on a bunch of reading right before you start another busy week. So I kind of got in the habit of doing my reading assignments pretty much directly right after my last class, just to kind of get it done and out of the way. And then if I felt I needed to refresh on anything, then I would sometimes do that on a Sunday, but I try to just get my homework done or the reading as quickly as possible. And that's what worked for me. So the tough part of that is the roommates and the friends that I had did it the opposite, and they waited till Sunday at 5 p.m. to read 50 law cases. So then I was like ready to go out and, hang out somewhere, and everyone else is bunkered in their room. So you just find what works best. So, but good luck. A lot of reading.
Yeah, a lot of reading. All right, Dylan.
Sure. I'll piggyback on Ricky's comment a little, because anecdotally, it is the story of my law school existence. I took off about 4 or 5 years before law school, and so I kind of had this idea that it would be like college, right? You go back and there's, you do some studying here, you do some other things there, you're you're in and out, and it all works out well, right? Which is the story of college for most people. And so college is like riding a bicycle, then law school is like flying a spaceship. It's much more complex and requires a lot more effort. And so anybody who knew me my first semester was very surprised to find out that I later became an academic success mentor, but I learned one lesson in the first semester, which I would suggest to anyone, which is to just treat it like a full-time job. So Monday morning, you get up, you take a shower, which is not always what you do in college, and you go to class, you dress presentably, and you spend the day at school. Where you spend the day focusing on your law school work. And come 5 or 6 o'clock, when you're done, you go home. And I know that doesn't work for everyone, but it certainly turned around a lot of people that I knew, including myself. And it's just a matter of getting your brain into the idea that you're at law school and not at college anymore. And it also helps you breed some of this professionalism that you're going to need when you graduate.
That's a really great distinction, because I did go straight through college to law school, and there was an adjustment. Even though I had worked before college, still that switch in mentality is key.
Right.
So the last thing that I'll add on to it, because I feel like there's not much I can say, beyond what my fellow alumni have said, is challenge your assumptions. When you come in, everyone brings into Vermont Law School a life experience and a world experience, and you're going to come across people who have had life experiences that are diametrically opposed to yours, and be sure not to assume that their experience is wrong, or your experience is more valid, or that your experience is less valid. Challenge the assumptions that either you have set for yourself or the world has set up for you, and make sure that you really in your readings or in your cases and in your oral arguments, that you are drilling down to really the fact of the matter, or the truth of the matter, and not necessarily what your preconceived notions or feelings would lead you to believe or argue. So just sort of challenge those assumptions on a day-to-day basis. Not just as you go into law school, but every single thing you do, challenge the assumption. So I think that was our last question, and everybody had a shot to give their little tip. So the last thing I'll say is, everybody, the April 15th is coming up, so make sure your deposits are in, and I'll kick this back to Katie.
Yes, thank you. And I want to personally thank all of you. This has been such a pleasure, and it's so important. And I can't impress on you as much as these are your mentors. These are people that will help you these next 3 years, because your career starts the moment you step onto campus. And these are your folks, and now they'll know you, and they're mentors. So when you have a question, when you need an internship, these are people that you can turn to. And to be honest, this is the first time I've done a Zoom alumni panel, and it's been wonderful. So I can't thank you all enough, and thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.